Stephen A. Smith of First Take on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Good morning, Stephen A.
Well, first of all, a couple of things. Golick, kudos to you. Congratulations. I don't know how you sit next to that man for 4 hours. That's number one.
Thank you.
Number two, I'm sitting here waiting, coming on as a guest, and typical Will Kane, true to form, keeps talking and talking and talking, knowing I'm waiting. This is the kind of disrespect that I have to deal with.
And just
What's up, Will? How are you?
Stephen, just so you know, while he was talking, I was looking at him mouthing, Stephen A. is on the line. Get to Stephen A. And he would shake his head no, like I don't need to do it.
And he took his time. And he took his time. That sounds like Will. That sounds like Will.
All right, well, thanks for joining us this morning, Stephen A. We'll be talking to you later.
Yeah.
That's Stephen A. Smith on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Hey, Stephen A., let's start with the news coming out. I don't. It's not like earth-shattering or anything like that. But in your mind, in the boxing world and the boxing game, what it means that the fight was approved for 8-ounce gloves.
Well, to me, I look at it as as something that's to the not to the advantage of Conor McGregor, literally, because I don't expect him to touch Floyd. I expect Floyd to pretty much school and annihilate him. And Floyd obviously is accustomed to fighting with 8-ounce gloves. But the flip side to it is that if you are a puncher and you're looking for a puncher's chance, which is the only chance Conor McGregor has, the fact that the 10-ounce gloves were reduced to 8, I think is something that helps him in that case, in that cause. I don't think it will ultimately end up helping him, but I do think that it improves his chances. It improves the chances of a puncher to have smaller ounce gloves. I think that's the only thing you can say about this.
Stephen A., it's 9 a.m. I know that you already know to some extent what you guys are going to be debating on First Take today. I'm not on the show, so I'm very curious where you are on this. I have a strong opinion about the statement put out by the NFL yesterday in opposition to the NFLPA, questioning Ezekiel Elliott's former girlfriend, alleged victim, and her credibility. The NFL has stated that any questions about her credibility, or at least the way that the NFLPA is rolling that out, is victim shaming. What do you think about that?
Well, I have a problem with it strictly because Ezekiel Elliott, if he believes he is innocent, has a right to fight, and the NFLPA as a union has a right to defend their guy. That's their job. Literally, it's their job. But the other side to this is that I didn't know that the NFL was in the guilt or innocence business. I do understand that they're concerned about the integrity of the Shield and protecting that at all costs, and I do get that part. But what this shows me is that the NFL obviously was inclined to do everything it could. They did. I'm not going to accuse them of not putting forth their due diligence, but as you know, Will, I've been on the record saying that while I had no problem whatsoever with the 6-game suspension, I did have a problem, Golick, so you know how long it took for them to come to that conclusion. Because even though we are living in different times because of Ray Rice and what transpired with him and Greg Hardy and Ray McDonald, et cetera, I still harken back to 2010 when I saw a National Football League that basically dealt with Big Ben Roethlisberger in a way that said, okay, we don't know about his guilt or innocence, but he should not have put himself in that position. It stains the league. We're going to deal with him. Whereas in the case of Ezekiel Elliott, they seem to be going out of their way to say, we believe he's guilty. And I don't think any sports league belongs in that business.
Okay, follow me.
With the NFL.
Follow me here on this, and you can both answer. But, Stephen A., let me start with you. Instead of guilty or innocence, I'm looking at this more as a civil suit, where they only have to prove 51%, and instead of guilt or innocence, it's you're culpable. If that, in fact, is more along the lines of where this is, would you buy more into that?
Well, see, I don't have a problem with it, Golick, if you're talking about Ezekiel Elliott and the alleged victim. I'm saying as it pertains to the NFL, who is supposed to be somewhat of a neutral party, particularly as it pertains to trying to gather evidence or what have you. You are the National Football League. You are not the court of law. Yeah, you have your own laws. You have your own standards. And if the man didn't meet standards because he stained the Shield, all I'm saying is that's enough to justify the 6-game suspension. You don't have to add stuff like you're touching on a preponderance of evidence and saying it's more likely that he's guilty than he is not. There's no problem with that as it pertains to deflated footballs because we're talking about football. But when you're talking about off-the-field matters, personal matters, domestic matters, and what have you, I don't believe that any sports league should be in the guilt or innocence business because so much money is involved, Golick. Who's to say that a case, and I'm not accusing the NFL of anything like this, but I'm just being devil's advocate here. Who's to say a sports league, knowing that there's an abundance of money at stake and what have you, depending on the situation, depending on the case, wouldn't be influenced by that to determine one's guilt or innocence? We don't know that. That's why we have a court of law. The sports leagues themselves should be sticking to the issue of whether or not you stain the league and compromise their brand. They shouldn't go any further than that when it comes to trying to discern one's innocence or guilt, because there's too many agendas that are involved in the equation that can convolute matters. And I don't trust the sports league to play that role.
I hear you. So what I hear you saying, Stephen A., if I'm understanding correctly, is actually, NFL, your burden of proof doesn't need to be more likely than not. Your burden of proof doesn't need to be anything, but you decided this because you feel like the whole thing tarnishes your image. You're going the other way. You're lowering the burden of proof, whereas I yesterday said to you, Mike Golick, that I think they ought to mimic the criminal justice system. Guilty there, guilty here. Innocent there, innocent here. Stephen A.'s going the other way. He's saying you don't need any burden of proof. You know why? Because it's your business. But here's the thing I disagree with you on, Stephen A. They're not trying to find guilt or innocence. They're not trying to find truth. If the NFL's position were this to me and to you, Golick, if it were, you know what, we've examined this entire thing. There are some credibility problems with the alleged victim here, but even considering those, when we come out the other end, we decide this is worth a punishment. If that was the line they were holding to, I think that's acceptable. But what they did starting yesterday is suggesting any questions about her credibility, which there are many questions now, including lying to police and a possible, according to Yahoo Sports, extortion plan against Ezekiel Elliott. If you engage in any of that, you're engaging in victim shaming, which says to me they're not searching for the truth, Stephen A. They're searching to win a PR battle.
Well, you put it succinctly. I get where you're coming from in terms of they're searching to win a PR battle. But in order to win the PR battle, what they're saying is truth lies on our side. And what I'm saying to you is that forget all that. If you're the National Football League, you're a multi-billion-dollar establishment. You play in our league. Do not find yourself in this situation. Growing up in the streets of New York City, I found myself in one situation after another when I was younger. And my mom, God rest her soul, would always come to me no matter what the situation is. It could be a speeding ticket. It could be a parking ticket. It could be me getting in a fight. It could be anything. My mother would always say to me, Will Golick, why you? Why are you the one in this situation? Of all the people in the world that this stuff is going on with, the cop stopped you for a speeding ticket? The cop gave you a parking ticket. This fight that took place, it happened to be you by accident. Why you? And what I'm saying is, to me, any multi-billion-dollar establishment that relies upon more than 1,000 players to represent and uphold their brand, their shield, has a right to hold you accountable if you stain the shield. And I'm saying all of this other stuff ain't needed by the NFL. Ezekiel Elliott, you've been accused of this stuff. This is what the police report said. This is what our investigation pointed out. July 17th, July 19th, July 21st, domestic violence incidences. Now, you can sit up there and explain it till the cows come home. That's for law enforcement officials, so you don't end up finding you're behind in jail. But during these day and times, with what we're going through in this world, for you to allow yourself to be put in this position, damn it, you gonna pay. 6 games, done. And they don't have to justify it beyond that, in my opinion, because they're not talking about innocence or guilt. They're talking about the responsibility that you have to protect the brand you swore to protect after you was drafted and you signed that contract to be an NFL player. Period.
Stephen, let me ask you a larger question. Coming off of how we see the relationship with Adam Silver and Michelle Roberts in the NBA and the Players Association, how they seem to be getting along well. It certainly seems that way, and things they're agreeing upon and such. In the NFL, we know the adversity with the union and the players, with DeMaurice Smith and with Roger Goodell. If, in fact, we do say This relationship will get better over time. If that does happen, what in your mind will have to happen between these two entities for there to be a better relationship?
You talking about the NFL Players Association and the NFL?
The union and the league. It's a horrible relationship.
That's an easy question. I hold two people solely accountable for it: Roger Goodell and DeMaurice Smith. Because let me tell you something right now. These two can't stand each other. They can smile in your face. They can talk about business, but it's well documented. Talk to anybody who covers the NFL, and they don't get along. Now, to some degree, I hold DeMaurice Smith even more culpable than Roger Goodell. Here's why. Roger Goodell has the power bestowed upon him by 32 billionaires who are league owners in the National Football League. What has happened is that DeMaurice Smith comes up in there, very astute, very intelligent, very accomplished as a lawyer in a legal mind. What does he want to do? Everything appears to be a legal issue. There is a difference between labor negotiations and labor relations, and everyone that I have spoken to in the NFL on both sides decry the fact that DeMaurice Smith does not do a good enough job with labor relations because he loves battling against Roger Goodell, and the NFL proclaims repeatedly that he tries to turn everything into a legal issue. And so when you have that going on, if you're Roger Goodell, what are you going to do when somebody tries to challenge or, dare I say, usurp your power? You're going to raise up, you're going to fight, and you're going to remind them who's the big fish in this pond. That's what Roger Goodell, through the in support by the league owners, that is exactly what he does. And if you're DeMaurice Smith, you turn stuff into a legal issue. It explains why the NFLPA always has a bunch of lawyers on retainer, whether they're employed by the Players Association or they're being retained. The fact of the matter is, Gene Upshaw, and Lord knows he wasn't perfect, God rest his soul, and a lot of players complained about him as well. But you listen to folks that talk about Tagliabue and him and others, and they talk about labor relations, going out, having a drink, having a dinner, talking things out, finding a way to finagle your way through things. That's not what DeMaurice Smith and Roger Goodell does. Every time we hear about something with these two, there are lawyers right next door ready to go to war. And that is the problem with these two guys. They gotta grow up when it comes to each other. Not in any other capacity because I'm not qualified. But when it comes to themselves as individuals in their personal relationship, both of them got to grow up.
DeMaurice Smith's term ends next March of 2018. He's been elected on a 3-year term. His first term started in March of 2009, so we'll see if the NFLPA feels differently about their executive director next spring. I've been sitting here thinking about your standards, Stephen A., and the truth of the matter is we're polar opposites, no surprise. But yours makes a lot of sense, and the truth of the matter is I think you can go either way. If you have a standard that says we follow the criminal justice system, that's fine. If you have a standard that you lay out, Stephen A., we don't need to explain ourselves, we just do this, that's fine as well. I think what the NFL needs to learn, and I don't mean to make light of this, but they need to learn from Chick-fil-A. We've talked about this morning. This is our business. We don't open on Sundays. Doesn't matter if we're inside Atlanta's football stadium. We don't do this. If you have a standard and you live up to it, and Golick, you and I talked about this a while back when I was sitting in the guest chair about kids and raising children and setting bright line rules for kids. That's the way you influence behavior. You set standards, and that's what the NFL needs to do. And I guess I'm sitting here today mad that they're calling credibility questions, which are pertinent, victim shaming. Just set a standard, and I think you're right, Stephen A. Either you go my way or you go yours. You don't have to sit here and explain it.
Right. That's true, but I will tell you that the Chick-fil-A is a bad example because I do require that you make some degree of sense. If you're Chick-fil-A and you don't do business on Sundays, that makes total sense. Except if you're in a football stadium.
Concerts.
7 of Atlanta's 8 games. Okay, that's concerts. Yeah, that's fair. But I guess
College
what I'm
football.
saying is this: primarily. Your business is you want to be there primarily because you want to be associated with the NFL. If most of their games are played on Sundays, what are you doing having a business right in there?
Well, Chick-fil-A doesn't care what you think, and that's the point. They don't care. That's their standard.
I guess that's Will's point, yeah.
And before we go, you got like a minute. I want to just make Golick mad quickly. is LeBron leaving Cleveland?
I have.
No, I'm asking Steve.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, from what I'm told, this is last year. I mean, who knows what LeBron? He does what he wants to do, and he's earned the right to do it. But I will tell you that everyone in NBA circles, including myself and Wojnarowski, I mean, we all believe that, in all likelihood, he's probably gone, but we don't rule out the possibility that he's going to stay. If LeBron James can still legitimately compete for championships and make, goobs and gobs of money, then he may stay in Cleveland. I doubt it. But anything's possible with him. He's earned the right to do what he wants, and he's not going to make a decision until he absolutely has to. That's just how he rolls.
All right, that's Stephen A. Smith on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Have a good time on First Take today.
Thanks, Stephen.